Welcome to the Hospital Finance Podcast, your go-to source for information and insights that can help you stay ahead of the challenges impacting healthcare finance. And now, the host of the Hospital Finance Podcast, Michael Passanante.
Hi, this is Mike Passanante, and welcome back to the Hospital Finance Podcast. As a follow-up to the recently released outpatient payment final rule, I am joined by Bob Mahoney as a senior consultant on our reimbursement team here at BESLER, and Dave Korn, who is a senior manager here on our reimbursement team at BESLER. And they're going to be discussing with me updates to provider-based facility reimbursement that came out of that final rule. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon.
So, Dave, let me turn to you first. One thing we hear about related to provider-based departments is site neutrality. Can you describe what site neutrality payments are?
Yeah, sure, Mike. I mean, this is something that's been discussed for several years. Basically, it's that Medicare payments for an outpatient service will be paid the same regardless of where those services are performed, whether it's in an outpatient department of the hospital, an ambulatory surgical center, or a physician office. And
that term, site neutrality, was addressed in the 2019 OPPS ASC final rule, was it not?
Yes, that's correct. Well, up to a point. I mean, there were certain provisions in the final rule that take steps to begin the movement to site neutrality for outpatient clinics and ASCs.
Okay, so let's start by talking about outpatient clinics. What can you tell us about those?
Well, sure. The clinic visit is the most common service billed under OPPS, and CMS believes that Medicare often pays more for the same type of clinic visit in the hospital outpatient setting than it does in the physician office setting. And CMS, in the final rule, it said that CMS is going to use its authority to pay for the HCPCS code, and that code is G0463, but that's basically the clinic visit code. And what they're going to do in all outpatient departments, they're going to reimburse that at 70% of the full outpatient rate in 2019 and 40% of the full outpatient rate in 2020. The final payment amount will equal the site neutral physician fee schedule payment rate for the services at an off-campus provider-based department. And CMS is estimating that that'll save over $300 million just in 2019. And the reduction to those payments is going to, like I said, it's a two-year phase-in period. The first year being a cut of 60%. The first year being a cut of 30%, and the second year a cut of 60%.
Okay, and what are the effects on ambulatory surgical centers?
Well, one of the first things that they did was, instead of using the consumer price index to measure the update factor for ASCs, that's what they've always done in the past. CMS will apply the hospital market basket update for ASCs for the next 5 years. So just like the hospital market basket update of 2.9% minus the MFP adjustment of 0.8%, which means a 2.1% increase for ASCs, the ones that meet their quality reporting requirements, and see if they would have used the consumer price index, the update would have only been 1.8%. But CMS will continue to reduce. This is the same as they do to hospitals. Will reduce the update by 2% for ASCs not meeting their quality reporting requirements. And again, they're saying that the purpose is to promote site neutrality between hospitals and ASCs, and to encourage the migration of services from the hospital setting to the lower cost ASC setting. Again, feeling that it's costing Medicare more money to have those services performed at a higher cost hospital setting.
And just to follow up with that, another thing that CMS did was add 12 cardiac catheterization procedures to the list of ASC covered surgical procedures. In the past, you always thought of this cardiac catheterization as a hospital-based service, but now that's even moving to an outpatient site neutrality. And CMS also approved 5 new procedures performed during cardiac catheterization procedures to the list of procedures paid by Medicare. So we're seeing more and more stuff being able to be done in an outpatient setting, such as an ASC.
Bob, were there any other outpatient departments affected?
It's not affected immediately, but beginning on January 1st, 2019, CMS is implementing a new HCPCS modifier, ER items and services furnished to provider-based off-campus emergency departments to collect data the extent to which OPPS services are shifting to off-campus provider-based emergency departments. You see more and more of those on the side of the highway, and they're tied out with the hospital to save you the trouble of going to the hospital. It's a quicker ER. But they don't know what's going on in these places, where it's being done. When CMS gets a bill now, currently it's an ER bill. Now with this modifier, they're going to know it's not done at the hospital. And they're paying money for this, and once again, they're looking to save money with the Medicare Payment Advisory Commission. It's looking at the higher rates for service that are being paid at these off-sites, and it's something the hospitals need to be aware of, because you can see the cuts in the clinics and the ASCs. And that's coming their way in the ERs.
Right. So given those changes, what would you recommend hospitals do?
It's real important that hospitals know where they're providing services, and that means they're updating their Medicare 855, which lists the sites that every hospital is providing service at, and also that their provider-based applications are completed with CMS. I know this sounds that you'd assume hospitals are doing this, but with all the mergers and takeovers and acquisitions, a lot of hospitals just don't know exactly what's theirs and what they're doing. So it's important that you follow the regulations. As these changes happen, you at least know what you have and what you're certified to do, so you get the proper payment.
Right, and so you're looking at that short-term rule change, but what can a hospital do as they're integrating this thinking into their long-term planning?
Well, I think you can see the trend here that CMS is trying to save money and pay less and less for the outpatient sites. And we've seen them jump up all over the country, where there's women's health centers or different areas. Now that those payments are being reduced, even though it's much more convenient to be out, maybe not go to the hospital and have an easier parking situation, hospitals need to look to bring that stuff back into the hospital setting and get the full payment. It's something they need to look at. We're seeing inpatient sites decline in non-reimbursable areas, move them off-site, and bring these sites back in, because you're not making the money that you thought you were making. It might not make the site profitable. The other thing is to look at working with physician groups and joint ventures to make sure that you're getting the most reimbursement for the hospital in that plan.
Yeah, and if you have a lot of, if a hospital has a lot of these outpatient services being performed at outpatient departments off campus, they need to take a look at and be ready for the reduction in revenue that they're going to see, in the foreseeable future as CMS continues to make these cuts.
Exactly, Dave.
Definitely a moving target. Something hospitals are going to have to be very considerate of as they go through their planning processes now and in the future. Bob and Dave, thanks so much for bringing this content to us and for spending some time with me today on the podcast. If you enjoy the Hospital Finance Podcast, please head up to iTunes to subscribe and leave us a positive review.
This concludes today's episode of the Hospital Finance Podcast. For show notes and additional resources to help you protect and enhance revenue at your hospital, visit BESLER.com/podcasts. The Hospital Finance Podcast is a production of BESLER. Smart about revenue, tenacious about results.